Hi, this is Steve Gillmor, and this is the Gillmor Gang. We've had a little bit of a problem with our cauliflower line, so Robert Scoble, who's in Seattle, will not be able to join us. But in the absence of... we already know what he's going to say, right? We have a special guest here to help us to decrypt the Facebook announcements, and that is Dennis Crowley of Foursquare. Welcome, Dennis.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Also joining us is Kevin Marks.
Hi there.
Ribbit headquarters, right?
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
back in Mountain View from England. I was in England for 3 weeks, so I may have missed a bunch of stuff.
Yes, you did.
How are you, Kevin?
I'm good.
All right, good to see you.
And from his secret location, John Taschek of Salesforce and CloudBlog. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Steve. Good to see everyone.
All right. So why don't we just cut to the chase, Dennis?
Yeah.
I'm going to try and avoid the usual aren't you terrified of Facebook questions, because I think you've answered those pretty effectively. But what do you see as the opportunities of what Facebook is doing for location?
Well, I think there's been a lot of folks that have tried to do, I'm switching seats here, tried to do check-in aggregation services in the past. And, ultimately I think that's going to be, it's probably a good thing for the industry, just so it's not as fragmented. And, we've been looking at their API and playing with it a little bit. And then, there's a good chance we're going to push our check-ins into the Facebook feed, and there's a good chance we're going to pull their check-ins out of it. But I think the big win here is really that, just like Twitter and Facebook taught the world how to share things online with photos and status updates and all sorts of, just social commentary, I think Facebook is going to teach the world what check-ins are all about. And that's a good thing for anyone in the space.
And what are check-ins all about?
Well, I mean, it depends. I'm sure if you ask the folks at Facebook, you might get another answer to that, or a different answer to that than us. But, we've been doing check-ins forever. We're doing them at Dodgeball. Foursquare really started out with the check-in as kind of the atomic unit, and we try to do everything on top of that. So we look at check-in as an opportunity just to serve up relevant information and relevant experiences to people that are nearby. It's not just an I'm here. It's I'm here, now what? Give me something to do, or tell me something, or give me a little bit of content that's going to make this experience a little bit richer.
Kevin, you have any questions?
I'm intrigued by the differences between them as well. I mean, for me, it's fairly obvious that location is an important component to our activities, and that's been true for a while. And Facebook, and certainly Dodgeball, pioneered that. But it was significantly communicating with people where you are at the moment. A lot of the pitch for what we got from the Facebook guys yesterday was talking about sort of history and preservation of where you've been, and that certainly is something that I use Foursquare that way. But Dennis, you seem to be more focused about immediacy up to now. Is that fair?
Well, it's I think even Dodgeball had very much of that flavor of the real time. It's all about what's happening right now and what's happening 3 hours from now. And about how to make the time in there, in between those two things, a little bit more interesting, or maybe a little bit more valuable. I don't think that we don't ignore the past. I think one of the great things about Foursquare is that we've got a critical mass of users that interact with us for 2 or 3 minutes every day. They do 3 or 5 check-ins, and on a daily basis, it's not a lot of content, not a lot of data that we're getting, but over hey man, thank you so much. But over check it out, I just got a iced tea delivered. It's awesome. But over the course of weeks and months, that ends up being a lot of interesting data about the types of places that people go, the type of things that they enjoy doing, the types of people that they hang out with. You can cut that stuff up and recycle it back to the users in really lots of interesting ways. I think that's going to be a really big opportunity for us.
John, any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to know about the differentiations in the mobile strategy. Of course, you've got the API, and you've got and you do have mobile applications everywhere. But how important is mobile going forward, or what, can you give some statistics on how many people are checking in on a web? I would assume it's all mobile, and then what kind of advantages do you have over some of the other competitors on the mobile solution?
Well, I think I think that's another big benefit that we have against other folks in the space. Like Foursquare's DNA is in location sharing, and in location sharing, it kind of you get the mobile DNA for free because that's kind of what we do. Like there's no way to check in on the website. Like there never was with Dodgeball, and like we haven't built in with Foursquare. Like we want to build things that people use like when the lids of their laptops are down, like when they're out in the real world, going out and experiencing things. And so in terms of like mobile strategy, you could probably debate different points back and forth. But I think it really is important to note that from the very beginning we were started to be a location company, and we were started as as a mobile company, and I think that's reflected in everything that we do and everything that we build.
Do you see any competition from, or let me ask another way, why has Google suffered so much with their location services? They have a mobile strategy, they have a web strategy, they have APIs. What's going on there? Or why don't you ever see them?
I don't know. I think they just always struggled with social, and I think that's that could be an entire different entire hour-long conversation over what is it with social that they don't get.
Well, we have an hour.
We have 45 minutes.
But I mean, my belief has always been that in order for services to take off in the near term, in order for them to to develop that passionate user base of people that go out and turn into advocates, a lot of these the services need to have some kind of personality to them and some kind of identity to them. And I think it's really difficult. And I felt like we ran into some of this when we were at Google. Is that it's difficult to build services that are supposed to scale to 30, 50, 100 million users right off the bat, because they've got to be kind of tailored down, and they need, by definition, they have to be a little bit generic to speak to that large of an audience. And one of the benefits that we get from starting from scratch and starting as a mobile, social, local startup is that we start with 0 users, and we can put whatever personality and whatever face we want to on the product. And I think that's part of what you see in Foursquare, which is the game mechanics and the snarkiness, and really more importantly, like the fun and the playfulness that we built into the product. Is I think that's the stuff that most people relate to. And you can poo-poo how like those touchy-feely things don't really mean too much to users, but I really think that's the core and kind of the soul of the service, and people identify with that.
Yeah, you mentioned game mechanics, and we at Salesforce use a lot of game mechanics. We're experimenting with them. It seems like that's how you got the big start, is using game mechanics, becoming there's incentives, there's tactics, there are rules that you have to follow, similar to a board game that anyone has to use, or any game that's developed. How do you see that applying to what you're going to do next? And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like when Naveen and I launched game mechanics as part of the Foursquare beta at South by Southwest in 2009, like we honestly did it as we thought it was just gimmicky. It's like, hey, this will keep people excited through South by Southwest, and maybe we'll get them using it for 2 weeks afterwards. And what we didn't anticipate is that here we are 18 months afterwards, and we've made subtle tweaks to them, but those game mechanics are still pretty powerful, and they work really well. Like we really nailed it on the first try. And one of the things that consistently surprises me is people love what we're doing, and I think the game mechanics they really need a lot of work. They really need a lot of improvement. There's a lot of stuff in the product that we're not happy about. There's a lot of stuff I'm kind of embarrassed about. And there's a lot of things that we need to fix. And people love it as it is. And if we can, another big push that you're going to see from us in the next couple months is redefining and redeveloping a lot of these game mechanics. Just because we've gotten much smarter about it. And I think once we start applying a lot of the stuff we've learned to the stuff that we've already built, we're really going to start to blow people away.
What is working in the game mechanics, and what do people love about it? If you have those statistics, you must have aggregated statistics over the last year.
I don't have any stats offhand to really support some of this stuff, but I hate to point to press articles, But even like that article that was in the New York Times yesterday about how passionate people get about about collecting and defending and like bragging about marriage.
I thought that was fantastic. That guy with the alley, Stalker Alley or whatever it was.
Yeah, Stabber Alley.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I mean, it was insane. It was like they're going to option that as a movie, I think, that article. Go on.
Well, listen, so here's the stuff. Like we designed these game mechanics on a whim, like literally like 18 months ago, like in a coffee shop. The story that's in the article is totally true. And here we are, like 18 months later, and when someone steals the mayorship of the local bar across the street from me, like even as the designer and like the architect of some of this stuff, I still like get personally pissed off about it, and it encourages me to go over there, and I want to steal it back, and I want my sense of ownership over that spot. And whoa, what is that?
That was a phone call. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's like the buzzing. I was like, did I just get gonged off the show?
Right, no, you just said the magic word.
Foghorn off the coast.
Yeah. Say the magic word. Yeah.
But it's like, even as like the designers of some of the stuff, like there's still a little bit of delight and a little bit of like, excitement about unlocking badges. And there's still that, some excitement over competing for mayorships. Like the one thing personally I think is flawed is the point system. And I think the point system doesn't really encourage behavior or the types of behavior that we really want in the system. And like we recognize that. And like, you guys are looking at me and I'm looking at the whiteboard in front of us that has all the sketches for like what Points 2.0 looks like, and it's there it is. You get a quick look at it, but it's like this stuff. It's going to be great, and it's like it's going to work like the.
Right, I'm going to drag that into Evernote and have it transcribed. Okay, go on.
And I think it's really going to do for every check-in what the mayors do for favorite places.
But I think that there's actually you're sort of sending I read in either a LA Times interview you did or somewhere in the last 24 hours, I kind of get the feeling that what you call game mechanics, or what is called game mechanics, is sort of it's somewhat misleading. That in fact, tapping into the deeper experiences and interests that people have is what this whole thing is about. So, we can say, it's like if it's a game. Like Beatles Rock Band is a game, but it's also you can actually go and listen to mixes coming straight off of the original tracks without any compression. There are things that you can do with these things that once they start to get some velocity, lots of things that weren't necessarily apparent or even important to the original design suddenly become the whole point of the thing.
Yeah, can I talk again?
I think so.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've long been inspired by it is Nike Plus, right? And I think I might have talked about this the last time I was on the show. But Nike Plus is the thing you put in your shoes, you run with it in your iPod, and when you run, it gives you metrics and feedback on how you're running, and you can compare it over time, and it shows you you're running faster, you're running longer, like you're getting in shape. And there's game mechanics built in that it rewards you. And like if you run a fast mile, Lance Armstrong comes in the headpiece and congratulates you. And it's like it's not a game, but it gives you feedback on something that you're doing anyway, and it encourages you to compete against yourself. And I kind of think Foursquare speaks to that a little bit. Like we're not trying to design this Farmville-esque game that people are addicted to, but we want people to do the things that they do in their everyday life, and we want people to get rewarded for that. It's like, how do you turn what you do in life into a game?
Then they're addicted to you.
Yeah, well, because it's just you're just getting candy for the stuff that you would normally do. And what we want to do is like this. The classic example of this is the gym rat badge that we made. Like we made a badge. Only way to get it is to check in at gyms, 10 days out of a 30-day period. And like people go out of the way to get the gym rat badge, and they end up they start going to the gym again. And like it's a good thing. It's like, let's make badges that make people go to art galleries and make people go to restaurants they wouldn't go to, and make people travel to places they wouldn't normally travel to. Let's make badges that encourage people to meet strangers. Like there's all sorts of interesting things we can do that like push people outside of their like boundaries or comfort level, and perhaps enhance their experience of everyday life or of the real world in general.
So if you were to take this and apply an enterprise lens to it for a second, the things in the enterprise that we all pay attention to who care about this stuff are things like business process and workflow and things like that. So isn't the game dynamics, aren't they sort of a blueprint or a map for workflow and processes?
A little bit. I think it's really, I mean, if you want to pick apart the definition of game mechanics, it's giving feedback. It's setting goals for people. Like, we want you to get down to inbox 0, and it's giving feedback along the way. Like, you're getting closer, you're leveling up, you're getting closer to this, and then it's rewarding people when they actually hitting that goal, and then encouraging them to move on to the next thing. And it's like, it's classic. Like, you see the same stuff in Legend of Zelda that you see in World of Warcraft, that you see in, you know, any games that are built around like getting your inbox to 0 or Nike Plus, or even some of the Foursquare stuff.
But I mean, isn't sort of inbox 0 illustrative of sort of fake goals because they're easy to measure as opposed to useful goals? And that's part of the challenge in the business side is coming up with something that actually makes sense as a metric that then doesn't become gamed in the other sense.
No, that's a really good point, and that's one of the things that we struggle with, right? So we get these calls from people. It's like, okay, forget about, you know, badges for eating and drinking. Like, where's the I worked in a soup kitchen badge? I'm like, well, that's hard to measure, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, a lot of what we're doing is thinking about how can we employ other people to help us measure things, you know, measure these other things that could potentially have rewards to them. Like,
you have the bit, what are they called? The go and do these things stuff. You've got recommendations, and then you say, I've done this thing. So that you've got a bit of a mechanism there, but that seems a little buried in the handheld apps compared to the original website.
Oh, well, that's oops, hold on, my computer's locked. So, not to go all like press release on you, but the next version of the Foursquare app comes out in probably like 2 weeks or so, and we're really reworking and rethinking like the way the tips and the to-dos work, because that's going to be the core of the system, you know. Like check-ins, like, listen, we knew everyone's doing check-ins. Like, it's no secret that Facebook was going to do it. We've been thinking for a while, like what's Act 2 for us? And Act 2 is, okay, let's take all this information about what people are doing, what people want to do, let's build that back into the app in a way that's manageable for people and easy to share.
Well, you can use Facebook as a sort of broadcast network for you to be able to push out your own metadata, which they don't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's that's gonna, we always talk about that's like Act 2 for the service. Like, you know, when we built this stuff, we weren't trying to rebuild Dodgeball. We weren't trying to build another check-in engine. It's like, okay, listen, we know how the check-in stuff works. Let's build that, and then the two experiments are A, game mechanics, and B, tips and to-dos. And can we, and you know, like the big academic question behind all the Foursquare stuff was, can you use software to to really encourage people to go out and do things that they wouldn't do? And then if you use game mechanics, can you reward them for doing those things? And it's like an academic exercise, and it turned out that like a lot of our initial thinking was right.
John?
Yeah, I think as far as the enterprise question goes, in the past, metrics and measurements were all kind of delivered as analytics, and it created a kind of a top-down metaphor where a manager would manage people based on the metrics. It gave no incentives to the people, doing the stuff at all. And if you had new types of badges or enterprise class badges that would fit into an enterprise, that would, or you or somebody else that is inspired by your company, those incentives would lead to higher productivity, more ROI. They could be all sorts of things. Getting the inbox down to 0 is probably the wrong thing, because I can just hit Control A and delete everything. But how many opportunities?
And
how many
does,
people
by the
did you
way.
call? Yeah. How many people did you call? How many face-to-face meetings did you have? And then have a kind of a game around that. I mean, that would be stellar in the enterprise. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that there's a big difference between making something a game and then making something playful, right? And I think people confuse that stuff a lot. Like a game has winners and losers, and you did well, you did poorly. And making something playful is more about like presenting users feedback, giving them positive or negative reinforcement, and encouraging them towards a certain path.
One of the things we talked about on the last time you were here, which was probably a year ago, you started in March '09, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was after that, but not long after that. One of the things we talked about sort of glancingly at first, and I think Sam Lesson was on the show, and he was
that's right. Yep.
He was more interested, I thought, in the idea of virtual check-ins, and you know, now we flash forward to today, and there are these sort of taking a location and then parsing it up into a bunch of mini locations, and you know, essentially creating locations and then checking into them, or applying dynamics to that. So are you any further along or further away from the idea of virtual check-ins?
Wait, I'm sorry. What do you mean by virtual check-ins? Like
into like a state of mind instead of
yeah, no, it's interesting because like we see that all the time on Foursquare now, and honestly, like we used to see that stuff on Taschek too. You know, people will check into like what was the snowpocalypse? Yeah, snowpocalypse. Like we had a big blizzard in New York. People were checking the snowpocalypse. You know, yeah, bring LeBron to New York was another one that people were checking into. And like they're not venues, but you know, people are checking into them anyway. And this is there's a classic lesson to be learned here, which was, you know, this same thing happened to Friendster back in the day when people started making fake accounts.
Was that a good thing?
Well, I mean, I think it was for the users. Like people wanted to be friends with New York. People wanted to be friends with Hulk Hogan. And you know,
yeah, but they're you know, Zuckerberg, you used what Friendster did as what not to do. So I'm just asking whether that's a good.
Oh yeah, well the thing was Friendster went in and deleted all those accounts, and the users like, this is what we want to do. Like, don't stop us from doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to go in and like if people check in at taxi cabs, like that's what they want to do. Like we should support that. Like we're not here to police, you know, or dictate what people should use the service for. We're here to like kind of guide them in a sense, and we learn from our users.
So you know, before. Kevin was talking about, or he was nodding in agreement about the fact that Google doesn't seem to get social. Do you think it has something to do with what you're talking about here? In other words, they have an idea of what the technology's for, and they aren't particularly tuned to what the user thinks the technology's for?
I don't know. I think Ohm wrote GigaOhm wrote a good piece on this a couple months ago, and it's something like, you know, not all problems can be solved with algorithms. You know, sometimes you need to go in there and you just need to do like what feels right. And you know, that I don't know. It's I think there's sometimes there just might be a little bit of too heavy of an engineering approach on some things.
Right, but you know, that might be fixed by hiring some people that you know, with creativity. But I don't think that's what the problem is. I think there's something deeper. About I mean, there's the problems that Google has in terms of reverse engineering all the data that they have and getting you know, acquiescence or agreement that it can be used. I think that's a problem that they have, that Microsoft has, and other companies have.
I mean, it just might be a big company problem that after a certain point, like you know, the products are too big and the audience is too big to really get creative with, you know, to get creative to the point that you get people excited again.
Another thing that we talked about on the last show was the thought of various small companies acting in concert to produce a larger sort of company network effect. Do you see that happening at all?
Here, can you give me an example?
Well, I mean, it's usually brought up in the context of we're all, you know, we are the world, we're all going to share data and all of that kind of nonsense. But
yep.
I'm saying that for
You're just baiting me deliberately here, honey, Steve.
I'm trying. How am I doing?
Pretty well. That was what I was next, because fairly clearly the check-in stuff, the places stuff is getting sort of to the point where there's enough examples of it we could standardize it without too much trouble of saying, okay, we have this idea of I'm at a place, the structure of the place is name, address, lat long, URLs, or set of URLs, and possibly some other data. But we're also getting to the point where many companies are constructing these databases in parallel. There's yours, there's Twitter's, there's Facebook's, there's Google Places, you know, a bunch of these. It seems like it will be a good thing to try and at least create a concordance between them that's in the public space, and ideally build a more shared set of these rather than everyone recreating their own over and over again.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while. Like one of the great things I think Facebook did for this whole space is Facebook Connect. And so if you are an entrepreneur or a student and you want to roll your own social network, like you don't roll it from scratch, like you use Facebook Connect. And you know, that's one of the things that helped us bootstrap. Like we spent less time building core social infrastructure and more time building the product. And someone's going to do that for, there's going to be a Facebook Connect of places. And
Right.
I don't know who it's going to come from, and it's like, maybe it's us, maybe it's Twitter, maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's Google. But, somewhere there's going to be a database of, here's all the Foursquare venue IDs, and they match up to these Google IDs, and they match up to these Facebook IDs, and these Yelp IDs. And, that's going to be the big, Rosetta Stone, great tool that comes out of this generation of startups, I think.
But I mean, talking to people like the Simple Geo guys and Tom Coates, who did there's been a bunch of efforts to try and do this stuff. It seems like we already know how to express geodata reasonably well. It's more that we just need to collaborate on connecting the pieces together.
I can tell you from our perspective, we're in a good spot to help with a lot of the stuff. And I know Twitter's into doing this stuff, and there's a lot of other companies interested in doing it. And it comes down to we just don't have the resources to do it. It's not malicious. I'd love to do this, and we'd
Right.
love to use that data set on our own. It's there's 27 people here at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and we got to get them pushing the iPhone app out, not doing the plumbing. So at some point,
Right.
we're going to have engineers that are hey, I don't know what to work on today, and we're like, oh, here's your project. But we're just not at that point yet.
So you've grown from where were you a year ago in terms of people?
Yeah, I was going to say we were at what month is it? It's August. It's
Doesn't
August.
matter. It's August.
Exactly 1 year ago, give or take 10 days, we hired our first employee.
Huh.
So
yeah, isn't that
before
nuts?
then
So
it
now-
was you. Okay,
Yeah,
now I see.
here's the space now, and if you follow these stairs upstairs, you go to about 8,000 square foot space of Foursquare World Headquarters, with room for who knows how many people. It's awesome.
Cool. And
Yeah.
you got some people in San Francisco too. I saw
Yeah,
Siobhan yesterday, and
Yeah,
she said
Tristan.
this.
We didn't open an office. Someone wrote an article that we opened an office there, but we have we got
What?
two
You mean
guys working out of
TechCrunch
the space.
doesn't have their facts straight?
What's that?
Well, you said somebody wrote an article. I believe the article said you were opening an office. I might be wrong.
No, we're borrowing desks. So I want to keep the product team and the engineering team here.
Uh-huh.
If we fragment it, we're just gonna distract ourselves.
You know what? I haven't really signed on to Foursquare until about 3 months ago. It's all right. Relax. I'm about to say that I'm already on it. And
It's hard to do this over Skype because it keeps skipping. Anyway, go ahead.
it's all part of my plan. The skips. We work hard to have low latency and lockups. Lockups are our friend. I was in New York for the TechCrunch Disrupt conference, and Gabe Rivera finally just insisted that I sign on to it. He'd been suggesting it for quite a while. So I did, and the reason I did was because in New York, you have this kind of sense of a physical community where things are constantly moving. I mean, nobody ever eats at home; they always go out. There are
Yep.
a million restaurants. There's a million, and it's literally a tool that you need in order to be able to keep track of people without having to have them literally broadcast to you in multiple directions to tell you where you are going. So it's valuable there. So given the fact that this somewhere I read that you were discussing, I think it was that Times article that you were talking about that the mayor came up from some friend of yours talking about it based on the amount of time you were spending in a village coffee shop trying to plan the product. Is there something about this product that is New Yorkish? Is there a reason why it didn't come out of the Valley, for example?
Yeah, I honestly believe, I think that both Dodgeball and Foursquare are special projects and have a good sense of personality to them, and simply because they came out of New York, and well, not just because they came out of New York, but because they came out of New York and they came out of real use cases. The D-Ball stuff came out when Alex and I were grad students and we were living that life, and the evolution of that into Foursquare is I was like, hey, I want to build games that are on top of the real world. And Naveen was heavily into building all this infrastructure about tips and to-dos and recommendation engines for places. And there's something to be said for like we're not here because hey, let's start a company. What company do you want to make? It's like we build things for our friends, and it happens like when we build the things for our friends that we want to use, like there's usually a good amount of other people that want to use them too. And because our stuff is like it's very much focused on trying to make sense out of like a chaotic world. Like New York has a lot of people, a lot of places, a lot of things to do. Like it's one of these like if you can design stuff that works here and solves the problem of like downtown Manhattan, like there's a good chance that stuff's going to work everywhere else. Just because this is like this is the worst case, this is the worst place to design for because there's just so much data. And so if you can manage this, then you can manage other information.
But to some extent, but you've also got a sort of a density both of places and people that means that it's much more practical. I certainly got a sense that when you guys brought Dodgeball to Google, the fact that you were sitting there in Mountain View and you're out on the limb at the valley and there isn't much there to do that. It works.
We were in New York.
San Francisco. But you were sort of talking to people based in Mountain View to try and explain it to them, and they were saying, why do we want to make this to work everywhere? And you were saying, no, it really works in New York. We need to focus on this one. I definitely got a sense of that tension.
Yeah. Oh no, I think we were. I think it was victim of that a little bit. And one of the things is like I don't think we ever realized we didn't get the scale to realize that it actually works outside of outside of big urban areas, right? And so Dodgeball was just focused on cities. Remember, we had like 20 cities.
Yeah. And
with Foursquare, we were just doing cities. We did up to 100 cities before we made it work in all the suburbs. And I was like, it's not going to work in the suburbs. But it turns out that it does, and people are still leaving tips for places. It turns out the places aren't 100 yards away; they're 3 miles away. But people are still seeking them out, and whatever. It doesn't matter if it's a 15-minute walk in New York or a 15-minute drive in the suburbs. It's that.
Well, the
spread
of
it's like this thing is either 5 to 15 minutes away by some means of transportation, and it's still relatively accessible to people.
And this, the spread of smartphones or superphones is dramatic in terms of its impact on.
There's another conversation here, which is, is New York a better place for startups than Silicon Valley? And that's another like hour-long episode of the show.
Well, don't worry, we're not going to have that one.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you haters, you can disconnect me right now.
No, I'm from New York. I grew up there, so
But there's something about
the answer's obvious. No, there's no way. It's Silicon Valley wins.
But the early adopters that we have here, like our early adopter friends, like they're not all tech people. Like I feel like when I go to the Valley, like everyone I hang out with like works at a tech company. It's just like a tech oriented scene, and the people here like they're bloggers and they're bankers and they're finance folks and they're in fashion and they're artists and musicians, and of course you get that anywhere else. But it's just like the tech early adopters are also those things in New York. And I feel like that really makes the stuff that we're building richer because it's just a different set of people that you're designing for. I don't know. I mean, you can take it or leave it, but I really feel that's one of the stronger things about at least how we were able to get from 10 users to 100 to 1,000.
Well, that all happened at South by, didn't it? I mean, that was where you took everyone from the Valley and dumped them in Austin for a week.
Yeah, but we dumped a prototype that we were testing in New York on a really diverse set of people.
Okay.
Rather than like, hey, check in. It's like, yeah, but now like there's like the idea of like having fun and some other purpose behind this stuff. I think that's very much driven by like New York state of mind.
So let me get your impressions about some other people besides yourself, like Twitter, for example. What do you think? Are you, as I am, impressed with how they're starting to roll out services that actually extend the platform after all these years?
Yeah, it's kind of awesome. Like I can empathize with Twitter's situation now after this summer of scaling or the summer of hell that we've been through. And people are like, oh, what? How hard is it to keep Twitter up? And why doesn't Twitter roll out features? It's like because the shit's breaking all the time. That's why. And we have the same problem. And so I actually think it's kind of awesome to go out and to see all the stuff that they're rolling out. Like they have all these ideas. They've got 50 whiteboards full of things they want to build. And it's just a matter of getting the platform to a point at which you can build on top of it. And we can totally empathize with that. Like we haven't launched really anything new this summer because we've been scaling up. And so I think it's great to see Twitter doing that. And I think I hope we see the light at the end of the tunnel in the same way they are.
So what do you specifically? What things do you find interesting about what they're doing?
Well, look at, I mean, I got the Twitter thing up on my screen right now, and it's like, who to follow is very, very basic, but it shows you that they're paying some attention to, the nuances in their social graph and how they draw attention to that stuff. Like, I'm really looking forward to seeing a bunch of improvements that are going on with Twitter search. You never think of Twitter as an archive of like everything that you've done in life, but I send 5 tweets a day, and I've been doing it for like 3 years. Like, I want to be able to mine that stuff out. Like, there's good trending data in there, and then all the stuff they're doing with location as well. Like, we know that they're running stuff behind the behind the scenes. It's just like, what do all these lat long coordinates mean? Like, there's got to be some visualization somewhere that no one's seen yet. And I have a lot of confidence that those guys are doing really interesting work and just haven't rolled it out yet.
John?
I think it's amazing what they have done. It's only, I mean, in just a year or so, when it was just basically a little year and a half ago, they're kind of just launching widespread and becoming a broadcast mechanism, to how they've influenced everyone to adopt those kinds of not just micro messaging, but the searches, the history, the analytics, how they've been able to get a bunch of other companies that no one's really ever heard of to create little analytics engines on them, like refollow and things like that. I think that's just it's brilliant. So yeah, they have scaling issues. They've grown. I mean, so
yeah, but I think they're over the. They will continue to have scaling issues as they become more successful again.
Yeah.
But the thing that I find interesting is, as Dennis was saying, the way that, for example, they have this new mechanism which basically suggests people to you, but it understands, and you understand that it understands who you are, at least in terms of the people that you follow and that you interact with. And it presents people based on that. And, I sort of held at around 200, 220, 50 follows for years. And in the past few weeks, I've just, basically cleaned up those follows by accepting 80, 90% of these recommendations. I mean, it's really impressive what they're doing. There's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes there that is successfully mining their social graph. So
yeah,
I agree. I think they need to have a who not to follow, like so people can chew it down, and have like maybe channels of
yeah, that's called lists, and we already know about that.
Well, that's a sort of interesting thing where we one of the things people have said about the Facebook places as opposed to Foursquare is that they want different sets of people in the two. I've certainly had female friends say, I really want a much smaller set of people following me on Foursquare than I would want on Facebook, because I don't actually want them to be able to find out which bar I'm in.
Yeah.
So I suspect that the places in Facebook is going to lead to a lot of people going, wait a minute, I did what?
Yeah, I think that's always been one of our benefits, just starting from scratch, is that our social graph is more representative of like the people that you meet in the real world. And I'm starting to believe that there's if you asked me like a year ago, I'm like, oh, why would you ever need more than one social graph? But you need a representation of a couple of them. And I think that between the three, like Facebook is literally like everyone I've ever shaken hands with at a conference or like kissed on the cheek at Easter, right? And Twitter seems to be like everyone that I'm entertained by or anyone that I wish to meet someday. And Foursquare seems to be people that I run into on a regular basis. And those are all three of those social graphs are powerful in their own different ways.
And I think that I know you're running out of time here, so we're going to make this a short show today. But what I was asking you about, as far as multiple services starting to interact with each other, sort of what you just said kind of implies that there is something interesting and different about each of these graphs. And how they can be orchestrated together, I think, is a really is where we're going to go very quickly now. Yeah,
well, it's interesting to I was making that example about how Facebook Connect came along and it really made the social graph open to everyone. It makes building social apps easier for entrepreneurs and students and whatnot. And like we think of like, oh, we're just building our own social graphs on top of Facebook. but Facebook could benefit from our social graph, and Facebook could benefit from Twitter's social graph. And so you think like maybe there's ways to, you're not just sucking data out of one and then that's the end of it. It's like sucking data out of one and then putting it back in another, and like they're all kind of working to make each other a little bit more powerful and a little bit more accurate.
Okay, so let's go around the table. Kevin, any last questions, thoughts?
Well, one thing that I feel is slightly missing from Foursquare is prospective stuff, saying I'm going to be somewhere, tomorrow, or like the stuff that Plancast and some of these other things have done, and that seems like a natural extension, because particularly as you say, at the moment it only works if you're 15 minutes away. If I see someone's going to be in San Francisco next week, I've got to say, okay, that's going to take me an hour to get up there. I need to think about that a bit ahead of time. Is that something you've been looking at?
Yeah, it's something we've been thinking about. It's a little bit of Plancast, it's a little bit of Doppler. It's more like I'm not a big fan of like I'm going to be at this place at a certain time, but I'm going to be in this part of the city at a certain time. Like
right,
those things
it's fuzzier. It's more like
it's a little Fire Eagle,
Yeah.
Yeah,
or blah, blah, blah. I'm going to New York for 3 days, and that's useful information because then the rest of you guys in New York can say, oh right, you should come to this thing and this thing. That becomes interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think one of the cool things about Foursquare is that when people land in your city, like you generally you know about it and it alerts you, and it's like It's not that someone's down in my neighborhood that I see every other day. It's more like, oh, this person's now here, and I only see them once a month. And that's a useful feature. So that stuff I like. Again, on the roadmap, if someone could just send me 10 engineers, we'll get it done.
Cloning.
A little package. Just package them up and ship them over.
Okay, John?
Yeah, I think the question about like where you're going to be is a good one, because that kind of leads into discovery of people you haven't met yet but would be interested in meeting in a certain location. But I'm mostly interested in the enterprise aspect, and I think that the game theory and the gaming dynamics that are generated, I think it sets a model. It's not the exact model that an enterprise would use, but it is a model, and I think enterprise companies that adopt this kind of thing would be ahead of the curve. I'm just wondering if there's agreement on that.
Agreement from us?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, like this thing started off as like an academic experiment, it's like an experiment, if you will. Like if you dangle digital candy in front of users in the form of game mechanics, like can you get them to change their behavior in the real world? And it turns out that it works. And if we can get people to go to the gym more often from a 60 by 60 like Foursquare badge, then I think you can get people to do all sorts of things. And I don't mean like manipulating them to do things. I mean like bringing out the best in people and encouraging them to get the things done they want to accomplish, and encourage them to kind of move forward with things. Like I'm a big believer in this stuff in a way that I was skeptical about a year ago.
Mm-hmm. On the other side, there's the draconian nature, like run by companies like Oracle and SAP, which shows that if you do exactly the opposite, you can be a successful company also. So it's how the new companies disrupt those companies that would be really exciting.
Yeah, remember, it's not about making things games. It's about making things fun, And I think there's such like an important lesson to be learned there. It's just making things fun and playful just tends to pay off in the long run, because you get more out of users, and your users like tend to participate with a different attitude.
Well, I'm just so happy now that I can't stand how great everything's going to be in the future.
I hate you.
So I want to thank you, Dennis, for showing up, and particularly I think that we're getting a real look into the Facebook announcement seems to be sort of like, okay, now that we've established that this is something that we've discovered, now what are we going to do with it? And I think you've got a lot of plans, and that sounds very exciting. I want to thank Kevin and John for their attendance. I want to thank Rackspace and particularly Rob Legess for their support in getting this show back on the air, and NewTek and the TriCaster for turning this into a video show. I want to thank everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't or didn't check in. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
I feel like, yeah. See you guys.